You've got the triune brain, you understand. The brain is 3 brains in one. Okay? Got the information processing theory. The brain is marvelous, but it needs sensory input before it flows through the 3 levels of the brain, and it needs motor output. Otherwise, you cannot impact on the world. But now we need to talk about flow. And there are 3 kinds of flow. Information can flow through the survival brain only. So it's in through the senses, you get that kind of a response, and there's an immediate fight, freeze, or flight response. So it's sensory in, survival brain foundation only, out through the muscles. That's that fight, flight, freeze response. It's not pretty. And see your manual for more details on the typical survival state. Okay, the second level. So information enters through the senses because there's no other way for information to get into your brain. Okay, it runs through the survival part of the brain. The emotions, which are messengers, perceive the input as emotionally loaded. Ooh, it's like the smell of coffee. Yeah. Or you see somebody that you really, really like, and that emotional response? And there's hardly ever language involved in the limbic response. It's normally sounds, like all kinds of sounds. So the second kind of flow is information in through the senses. There's a huge emotional response, and then there's immediate action. You smell the coffee, the emotion part of your brain, which is the limbic system, says action, and you go over into action, and you buy some, and you drink some. You walk through the mall, you see something that really piques your interest, you have to have it. What happens? Go over into action. It's not always positive, obviously. So that's where impulsive behavior comes in as well. So do you get it? The second layer of flow is sensory in. Information turns in the limbic system, and it goes down through the muscles. So it bypasses rational thinking. And we can pause here and talk about addiction. We can pause here because that's what happens with addiction. That's what happens with kleptomania. That's what happens when people don't have control over their physical responses. It's because there was such a strong emotional reaction to whatever they've perceived that they immediately, without thought, went over into action. So very often, when we find ourselves in those situations, the next day or the next hour, when you think back of that, you think, what were you thinking? Well, it's very simple. You weren't, because the information turned before it got to the rational part of the brain. So, first level of response, not pretty, survival response, foundation only. Second level of response, it's typical addictive behavior, highly emotional, irrational, but it's sensory input, limbic system, motor output. And then here comes adult corporate behavior. Information in through the senses. The heart beats. It says engage, whether you want to or not sometimes. And up, all the way up to the roof for rational contemplation and decision making and analysis and synthesis before you go over into action. So the third level is sensory information in, up through the survival part of the brain, right through the limbic system, up to the neocortex, which is the roof area, back down through the limbic system, and out through the survival part. That's what we call an integrated state. That's when all you have, all the experts that we're going to talk about, they work in symphony. They work together to give you the best possible behavior in any given moment. So flow, in its overall perspective, means that everything that you've got, all your senses, all the different parts to your brain, all your muscles are ready to do your bidding. It's a marvelous state, and we hit it a couple of minutes if we're lucky, per day. But it's a marvelous state. And it's something that we consciously work towards at the Mind Dynamics Institute.